Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mount St. Joseph University welcomes you to this evening's performance. At this time, we ask that food and beverages remain in the lobby. Aha! Aha! Well, pick up after yourself then. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a celebration of life for Mr. Jim Scott.
James Francis Boland was born on December 3rd, 1942, 1 year after the Pearl Harbor attacks plunged us into World War II. Jim was barely walking when his father headed overseas in uniform. His mom took these snapshots that you're looking at and sent them with her letters to Jim's dad in Europe. After the war, Jim's sisters Joanne and Judy were born. Jim grew up in Binghamton, New York. Even as a kid, he started his day in the middle of the night with a morning newspaper route, delivering the papers in the dark before school. In 1954, just days after his 12th birthday, Jim was stricken with polio. At first, he was completely paralyzed, and it was thought that he might never walk again, and he was sent to a rehabilitation hospital 60 miles away in Ithaca, where he stayed for 6 months. The March of Dimes paid for Jim's hospitalization and treatment, and his family visited every Saturday. While a patient there, and you can picture this, Jim would make his own hospital rounds, visiting and talking with the many other polio patients, children and adults alike. Many were confined to iron lungs, and Jim made it his business to talk to them and read to them every day. One day, Jim was sitting on the side of his hospital bed listening to the radio when he heard on the news that Jonas Salk had developed a vaccine against polio. Gradually, Jim got better. His left arm and hand and his right leg remained affected for the rest of his life, but he never let it stop him from doing anything. Polio was life-changing and life-shaping for Jim. As a teenager, Jim was a ham radio operator. Morse code was his second language. In high school, Jim got a part-time job working behind the scenes at his hometown radio station. And during his senior year, Jim was given his own weekend radio show. He chose a radio name, Jim Scott. At age 17, Jim Scott was on the air. At about the same time, Jim considered becoming a priest. He thought he'd check it out, so Jim's dad drove him to a highway on the edge of Binghamton, dropped him off, and Jim hitchhiked his way to a seminary in Winchester, West Virginia. After a few days there, Jim knew that he was not suited for the silence of seminary life. So he hitchhiked his way back to Binghamton, where he soon became a full-time morning disc jockey while also attending college full-time. Before long, Jim met Linda. They married and had 3 sons, Jim, Scott, and Casey. In 1966, Jim left college with only 9 credit hours remaining for a huge opportunity in San Diego. There, Jim became one of the original boss jocks of rock and roll radio. After a time, he came back east to work in Buffalo, New York, and then Denny Jansen picked up Jim at the airport in the WSAI Rocket Mobile. Jim and Linda bought land in Dearborn County, Indiana, where they raised 3 boys and lots of horses. In the late 1980s, Jim and Linda parted, but from that union, there are 11 grandchildren.
Speaking of Ludlow, Kentucky, that's where this request came from. Yes, sir. Fella home from work this morning wanted to hear that rainy day feeling again. Picked a good day to request this song. 80% chance of showers and thunder showers today. High near 80, 63 now.
Here comes that rainy day feeling again. 1360 WSAI.
Hey, good morning. It's 9:28 in the morning. Here comes Jerry Reed. When you're hot, you're hot.
Well, now me and Homer Jones and Big John Talley had a big crap game going back in the alley. And I kept rolling them 7s and winning all them parts.
1360 WSAI.
9:30 in the morning. Good morning. This is Jim Scott playing a request for Northern Kentucky. But if you live in Indiana or Ohio, you can listen.
I met a gentle ballroom queen in Memphis. She tried to take me upstairs for a ride.
Honky-tonk woman. Oh, those are the best kind. The only thing wrong with honky-tonk women are those honky-tonk men that hang around, you know? But then if you go to the other extreme, not a honky-tonk woman, but a sweet city woman that used to live in Erlanger, well, you got something else. A song about it and all those gals. By the Stampeders. Ready for it? All right. Start clapping your hands and sing along. Come on.
Well, I'm on my way to the city lights, to the pretty face that shines her light on the city nights. And I got a kick.
Sweet, 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 sweet city woman. Good morning. 9:36 on WSAI. 63 degrees, and it's going to be cloudy today with showers and thunder showers off and on. In fact, there's an 80% chance that's going to happen. So get your umbrella out. Boy, I wouldn't miss that for the world, boy. 23 minutes before 10. Good morning to Carol Collins, and happy birthday, honey. She was 15 old about a week or so ago. On vacation, not at home, so we give her a belated birthday. Carol Collins, 15. Oh, and a good friend of mine, Bob Colquitt. Bob Colquitt had his 20th birthday Saturday. So, had a birthday recently or today or it's coming up, happy birthday to you. What's the matter? Can't you read the signs? 5-man electrical band. Good morning.
1360 WSAI Music City.
Jim Scott, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here to celebrate the remarkable life and legacy of our dear friend, Jim Scott. My name is Denny Jansen. I will be your co-host this evening along with Brian Combs and Mo Egger. There is a good chance that I was among the first people in Cincinnati to meet Jim Scott. I say that because I picked Jim up at the airport when he flew in from Buffalo, New York for his job interview at WSAI. It was March of 1968. I was a senior at Elder High School, and I had a part-time job at WSAI. I was the station gopher. I guess I was a goober long before Uber even came along. I was a Price Hill kid working at the radio station that all of Cincinnati listened to, so I picked Jim up at the airport in the WSAI Roving Rocket. It was a 1968 Chevrolet Impala wagon with a big rocket painted on the side. I picked him up at the airport, brought him back to West 8th and Matson Place. He went inside, he negotiated his contract, signed it, and I drove him back to the airport in the Roving Rocket. Boy, any chance I got to drive in the Roving Rocket, I took it. Jim's first day at WSAI was Monday, March 25th, 1968, and he hit the ground running. Starting the first week, after Jim got off the air in the morning, he would pick a street or two or three in Cincinnati in a neighborhood and literally go knocking door to door. He would introduce himself, talk a bit, and ask the person to, hey, give me a listen on WSAI. Then Jim would go down streets lined with businesses like Glenway Avenue, Warsaw Avenue, Coleraine Avenue, Beachmont Avenue, and ask owners to put Jim Scott was here on their message signs out front. Had happened. The next day between songs, Jim would talk about all the different people and business owners he'd met. Before too long, Swifton Shopping Center put up on its sign a message reading, Jim Scott has not been here. So, Jim being Jim, he went out the next day and met all the folks with stores in Swifton. And the next day after that, their sign said, Jim Scott was here. Jim Scott, literally by force of his nature and personality, made himself a household name. WSAI had little to no budget for promotion. Jim just thought stuff up and made it happen. Fun contests and promotions that grew from his very vivid imagination. A bikini contest on Fountain Square in the middle of winter. A miniskirt contest. A yo-yo contest. He organized a contest to win a waterbed and awarded it to the girls at Mount Notre Dame High School in Reading for their smoking lounge. There's a photo out there somewhere of Jim sitting on this waterbed surrounded by lounging, smoking teenage girls. Jim, by actual count, broke Teddy Roosevelt's world handshaking record one day at the new Northgate Mall, shaking 8,513 hands. Every Halloween, night after night, year after year, Jim greeted visitors at the WSAI haunted houses. He called literally countless and thousands of listeners who have never forgot when Jim Scott called them on their birthday or some other special occasion. Jim told his listeners that he could levitate people. One lunch hour, people packed Fountain Square to see him do it. By some magic, he did it, if only in their imaginations. On some summer sunny days, Jim would announce a street, go there and rub baby oil on the backs of women and kids gathered to sunbathe in their front yards. Johnson & Johnson got wind of it and supplied Jim with gallons of free baby oil. At the Harvest Home Parade in Cheviot, Jim showed up walking a borrowed donkey. The donkey was draped in a sign that said, "Everyone listens to Jim Scott except me, and you know what I am." Like the Pied Piper, Jim initiated and led the annual 25-mile March of Dimes walk for almost 20 years. He hosted countless dances at Lesourceville Lake and the Green Hills American Legion Hall. And then there was the WSAI All-Star basketball team, the Fabulous Five, led by Jim Scott, that came to your high school gym along with a few college ringers and always beat the shorts off the faculty team. On opening day, Jim did his show from the billboard at Crosley Field and later at Caddy's. Listeners on their way to work laid on their horns and flashed their headlights in acknowledgement of his participation. And every person who was a kid in Greater Cincinnati from 1968 to 2015, almost 50 years, remembers listening intently and jumping for joy on snowy mornings when Jim read the school closings. Yippee! I could go on, but thankfully won't, I'm sure. But my favorite was a contest involving a hot young catcher for the Cincinnati Reds, the Win a Date with Johnny Bench contest. Jim thought it up, set it up, and with Johnny, chose the winner, a young woman who wrote her entry on a baseball. Her name was Maxine Brady. She was a voice major at the College Conservatory of Music, and I was sent to pick her up because, after all, I was the transportation director at WSAI, but not in the roving rocket, mind you. No, 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 no. The station general manager was a fellow by the name of Jack Carnegie, and he was a bit of a stiff, but he was kind of an affected person, and he had a Rolls Royce. So somehow Jim talked Jack Carnegie into letting us use his Rolls Royce for the Date with Johnny Bench promotion. And, well, who's going to be driving my Rolls Royce? And they said, well, the guy over here with the chauffeur's cap, Denny Jansen. He answers the request line, among other things. So I picked Johnny up at the Forum Apartments on Dick Smith. I went over to, I think it was Dabney Hall, where Maxine Brady lived. Girls were hanging out of the windows trying to get a glimpse of Johnny. Maxine came down. She was resplendent in a lovely dress. And then we went to Delhi to pick up Jim and Linda Scott. So then off we go to 6th Street, to the Masonette. This is a dinner with Johnny Bench, Jim Scott at the Masonette. So I dropped them off at the Masonette, and Johnny says, thanks, come back in 2.5, maybe 3 hours. And he gave me $10 to get gas. This wasn't for me. So I get to a filling station down in Queensgate. I had no idea how to open the gas gate on a Rolls Royce. I was sitting there backing up traffic looking at the owner's manual trying to figure out how to open up the gas gate on a Rolls Royce. Figured it out, got my gas, and then, well, what am I going to do for the next 2.5 hours? Well, I figured my mom and girlfriend would really like a ride in a Rolls Royce. So that's what I did, being the transportation director for WSAI. Picked up my mom, Seal Jansen, many of you know her, my old girlfriend, Jan Blinkhorn, and drove them around downtown on a Rolls Royce. Wow. The old WSAI studio is in Price Hill, on the exact site of what is now the public Incline House restaurant. Every morning, looking out that big studio window with that amazing view of our lovely city and river and the hills beyond, Jim watched the sun pop up and he welcomed the sunrise and a brand new day for all of us in Cincinnati. Every day was a new day, and it was going to be a good one. No matter what happened yesterday, today would be a good day. And listening to Jim Scott, we all felt the promise of that better day. Appropriately enough, this was one of Jim's favorite songs, and probably one of yours too, sung for us tonight by Sean Kelly. Sean?
Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, the eyes is turning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Little darling, I feel the ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Here comes the sun, do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. It's alright.
The pride of Elder High School, Sean Kelly. Thank you, Sean. Speaking of Jim and that big picture window looking out over downtown, when I was working in the newsroom at WSAI years later, They actually let me on the air there. I can remember Jim would be on the air in the morning, and he would try to get people stirred up and make sure he got a little reinforcement. And people driving west on the 7th Street Viaduct, obviously, were driving toward Price Hill. And he'd say, hey, come on, you westbound people on the 7th Street Viaduct, let me know you're out there. And they would flash their lights instantaneously. Yeah, it was just remarkable, the touch and the connection that he made with listeners. Jim was a born optimist. He made you feel like anything was possible, especially when you needed it most. Jim always found the good in people. He was encouraging and kind. He literally and figuratively opened doors for people. That is probably why a few years ago, Jim fell in love with this next song when he first heard Pamela Myers sing it at the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park in her role as Mama in the musical Gypsy. Jim went back to see Gypsy 2 more times during its Playhouse run, and this song became something of an anthem for him. He would often belt it out in person or on the phone for someone facing a challenge. Jim believed in you, and he always wanted you to believe in you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cincinnati's own Tony-nominated star of stage, screen, and TV, Pam Myers, singing the song Jim loved, Everything's Coming Up Roses. Pam?
From the Great White Way to Delhi Road, you know, in America, as Jim Scott would say, anything is possible.
Anything is possible. You're from Cleves, anything is possible.
Thank you, Pam. That was terrific.
Thank
God
you.
bless you.
My
Great
honor.
to see you. Pam preceded me at the College Conservatory of Music, and unlike me, she actually graduated, you know. I attended school periodically. I was not a, I know you might find this hard to believe, but I was not an outstanding student. To Jim's literally millions of listeners, that's why Jim leaving college 9 hours short of his degree, that always appealed to me. It's like, if Jim can do it, so I did. To Jim's literally millions of listeners over his half-century on the radio, he felt like a friend. That's because he was a friend. Whether you ever met him in person or not, Jim was your friend. Jim was the same person off the air that he was on the air. He was the absolute real deal. He did not have a phony bone in his body. Jim truly loved meeting people, talking with them, and learning their stories. He never assumed that anyone knew who he was. With his great smile and wherever he might be, Jim would simply stick out his hand and say, "Hi, I'm Jim Scott. What's your name? Tell me about you." And he would listen and care and remember. People were often astounded when they would meet Jim again years later and he would actually remember their names and the circumstance under which they had first met and what they had talked about. Jim always credited his dad for giving him this gift, and it is a gift. When Jim gave the commencement speech right here at Mount St. Joe in May of 2017, his speech was about the importance of meeting people face to face, and he explained exactly how to do it well. In Jim's own words, "My teacher was my dad, who taught me, in both words and actions, respect and concern for others. My dad said everyone deserves recognition and no one should ever be ignored. He showed me how to engage people and acknowledge them and make them feel valued. This is what turned out to be the key to my success. I am sure it will work for you too." Jim was the kind of friend who made everyone feel like they mattered. He didn't just listen, as I say. He truly heard you. He remembered the small details and followed up like it meant something to him, because it did. It did matter to him. Jim always showed up with an open heart and steady presence. To Jim, friendship was sacred. He wasn't afraid to call or visit a stranger whom he heard could use a friend's smile, especially if there was a bad medical diagnosis. Jim was that rare kind of person who never met a stranger. He always made each person feel important. Our next musical offering, sung for us by Lady Joy and Sean Kelly, embodies that very spirit of Jim Scott. Lady Joy and Sean Kelly, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you came in up in me. Now I'm so much more to see. And so by the way, I thank you for the times that we're apart. Well, then close your eyes and know these words are coming from my heart. And then if you can remember to keep smiling, keep shining, knowing you can always count on me for sure. 'Cause that's what friends are for. In good times, in bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. 'Cause that's what friends are for. Keep smiling, keep shining, knowing you can always count on me for sure. 'Cause that's what friends are for. In good times, in bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. 'Cause that's what friends are for.
Good evening. I'm Brian Combs, the morning news anchor at 700 WLW. Thank you. Very fortunate this week to have celebrated 40 years of working at the nation's station. Thanks again. And very, very blessed to have spent 20 of those years working closely with Jim Scott. I delivered the news during his morning show, and now I get to pick up where Denny left off. In 1972, when Jim was at the very top of his game at WSAI, he got an offer that he couldn't refuse. Not the Vito Corleone one that you have no choice to accept, but a really good offer. Came from New York City, radio station WABC. Jim took the job. Who wouldn't? His colleagues there included the legendary Wolfman Jack and Murray the K, and another personality that good old Jim Scott was hired to counterbalance, the edgy bad boy Don Imus. Meanwhile, Cincinnati and WSAI sorely missed Jim. Station manager at WSAI continued to ask Jim to come back. There were phone calls, letters, even Western and Union telegrams. I see a few confused faces. Kids, that's like a text message, but somebody actually delivers a piece of paper in person. The message was clear. They wanted Jim back. After a year in the big city, Jim decided that it wasn't a place to raise a family. Like the words of the Jim Croce hit song at the time, Jim Scott determined that New York is not my home. The lyrics that Croce wrote in that song could have been about our Jim. I pictured Jim getting in the old Rambler, leaving New York, headed east back home to Cincinnati, turning on the radio, and hearing that Jim Croce song pop on. And as Jim would only do, I'm sure he started belting it out in true Jim Scott fashion. Though all the streets are crowded, there's something strange about it. I lived about a year, and I never once felt at home. I thought I made the big time. I learned a lot of lessons awful quick, and now I'm telling you that they were not the nice kind. And that's the reason that I gotta get out of here. I'm so alone. Don't you know that I gotta get out of here, 'cause New York's not my home. Hey, Jim. Thank you. Cincinnati had become Jim's home, even though he was a native New Yorker. He returned to WSAI, and Cincinnati gave Jim a hero's welcome. According to the Inquirer, Jim Scott Day on Fountain Square drew the largest crowd ever, till the Big Red Machine won the World Series a few years later and broke it. There was also a Jim Scott night at Riverfront Stadium, brought 47,000 people to the ballpark. Jim was back immediately at the top of his game. Once again, the top-rated Cincinnati morning radio man, and he stayed on top for 4 decades. In 2013, the Inquirer named Jim the #1 radio personality over the past 4 years. For 46 years, Jim rose at 2:30 in the morning for his 5 to 9 program. He brought listeners in Cincinnati a warm start to each day. Getting a little ahead of myself, though. In the late 70s, while Jim was back at WSAI, they changed their format. They went from top 40 that Jim knew well to country music. So instead of playing Bad Bad Leroy Brown, the iconic WSAI started playing songs like Willie Nelson's Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, and Barbara Mandrell's Sleeping Single in a Double Bed. I'm not going to sing that one. It does, though, have that classic country line that drinking doubles alone don't make a party. Country was not Jim's style, but he stayed on, held on to most of his audience. In 1981, he moved to the FM dial and once again got the chance to play rock and roll at Yes 95. That year, John Lennon's Just Like Starting Over topped the charts. Another song that Jim could certainly identify with at the time, because coming was the biggest change of all for Jim Scott. George, can I get a drum roll? Thank you. On January 23rd, 1984, Jim Scott made his debut on 700 WLW radio as a talk show host. There were no more records to help fill the time. It was all news and information in a fast-paced, high-energy format that WLW still follows today. Each day, Jim would spend as much time prepping off-air as he did being on-air. He would interview newsmakers from presidents to movie stars to sports figures, authors, news correspondents from all over the globe. And he interviewed your neighbor down the street. He'd layer in news, weather, traffic, and of course those school closings. And he did it all with the Jim Scott warmth and wit. He was the morning man on 700 WLW for 31 years. Would have been 32 had it not been for that time Jim suddenly disappeared from our radio station and went to Wink 94.1. You might remember this. It was mid-90s. Apparently during contract talks with WLW, some dolt on the WLW side of the table tried to play hardball with Jim. It wasn't you, was it, Darryl? They thought Jim wouldn't leave, but by God he did. Abruptly and mysteriously, off the air for a month or so, Jim Scott was gone. But back were the Jim Scott billboards. All over town. Where's Jim? And they did it in like the block letters that the kidnappers use. It was on billboards, the sides of metro buses, ads in the newspaper and television. And one morning, Jim Scott came back on another station, Wink 94.1. It was that very same day, and then it was announced the owners of 700 WLW, J-Corp Communications, bought Wink Radio. And they bought the whole station just to get Jim back. And Jim got the contract he deserved. Now, Jim was as surprised and amused as anybody. Immediately, he sent J-Corp's president, Randy Michaels, a dozen roses. And he left a note that said, "Randy, I never believe in long divorces." Think about buying the car dealership just to get the car you want. Throughout Jim's long career, he was a tireless supporter of nonprofit organizations. He gave not just his voice, but he gave his time, his energy, to a variety of charitable causes. He was a true public servant, greatly contributed to the quality of life in our area through his volunteerism and fundraising. Thousands of Cincinnatians would accompany Jim every year on the annual March of Dimes walk. They raised millions for that organization that helped little Jim when he was paralyzed with childhood polio. He volunteered for United Way for more than 50 years. He served as the on-air master of ceremonies for WCET's Action Auction, active with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, a variety of Cincinnati arts organizations, and the Hawksworth Blood Center. Jim would even dress in full uniform as First Admiral of the Freestore Food Bank's Rubber Duck Regatta. That's part of the big fireworks show every year. And Jim would don leotards and velvet robes to lead the Over the Rhine annual Bachfest. He emceed and literally spoke at thousands of charitable events over the years, and I think he and I probably sampled the fish at every Catholic church during Lent in this area. And if you know Cincinnati, you know just how many churches there are. I could tell you story after story after story how Jim would go out of his way to connect with people during those visits. And that includes a man that he met at Holy Family Church who had just lost his father. This was in Price Hill. Jim took his new friend, crossed the street over to the church, and they lit a candle in memory of the other Jim's dad. The little gestures like that were the ones that people remember for the rest of their lives. And it's why our Jim is so beloved. When my dad and father-in-law were in nursing homes, Jim made sure that he came to visit, and along the way, he'd check in with the other patients and the staff, sparking joy. Things came full circle for Jim and I when I visited last year at the ALS facility where he's being cared for. He gave me my Spark Joy bracelet that you all now have in your packages to remind me that he expected me now to help carry on that legacy of sparking joy in others, making people feel valued. The examples of how Jim did that could go on and on. He was honored time and time again for his nonprofit work. In both 1996 and in 2000, the U.S. Olympic Committee named Jim Scott a community hero. It was among his greatest thrills to be able to carry the Olympic torch in the relay through the streets of Cincinnati and Covington. Jim's hands-down favorite charity was the Salvation Army. For the last 10 years, Jim served as the Red Kettle Campaign's honorary chair, and he took it very seriously and with great joy. He spent his holidays ringing the kettle, places all over town, recruiting others to ring the bell the same way. The Salvation Army's motto is doing the most good. And the same can be said of Jim Scott, because that's what he did every day. You just made my point. Cincinnati loved Jim, and Jim loved Cincinnati. It was a mutual feeling. Our next song tonight speaks to just that feeling. It's a recording of James Taylor, who was just at Riverbend this past week. When Jim was alive, he never missed James Taylor's show. Sweet baby James and good old Jim Scott seem so much alike over the years. Ageless, classy, classic, and beloved.
How sweet it is to be loved by you. How sweet it is to be loved by you. I needed the shelter of someone's arms. There you were. I needed someone to understand my ups and downs. There you were, with sweet love and devotion, deeply touching my emotion. I want to stop and thank you, baby. I want to stop and thank you, baby. Yes, I do. How sweet it is to be loved by you. Feels so fine. How sweet it is to be loved by you. I close my eyes at night, wondering where would I be without you in my life.
Thank you, baby. Oh, yes. How sweet it is to be loved by you. How sweet it is to be loved by you. Oh, now, how sweet it is to be loved by you. It's like jelly, baby. Just like honey to the bee, baby. How sweet it is to be loved by you.
I love seeing the images of Jim from 700 WLW, our studios in Mount Adams. I don't know if you know, but the board that's in the lobby when you go out at intermission was the actual board that he used every day on his show. And brings back some great memories. I don't know if you guys saw my shirt. I can step out from the microphone a little bit. This was about 2008, I think, opening day in Cincinnati. And the promotion that the station did was a takeoff on the Obama campaign's hope posters. You know, WLW is such a left-leaning station that, you know, it sided with that side, of course. But everybody at the station had to pick like a personality who they wanted to wear for that day. So some of them were like hope and different slogans. So I took the Jim Scott, of course. And we all went to opening day that day wearing the shirts of all the different celebrities. One of the things working with Jim that I watched with great admiration was the way that he would transition from topic to topic. It was seamless. It made his commercials feel like they were a regular part of the programming instead of the intrusion that they are from so many other shows. Nobody could voice a commercial like Jim. His first sponsor on the radio, way back in 1968, was Grippo's potato chips. Every day, all those years, every day, he did a commercial for Grippo's, and not one of them was the same. He just made them up. Grippo's trusted him to do that. His commercials were always original, pretty much entertaining, because Jim was a good storyteller. He might build a story around a listener he met yesterday in a little diner in Cheviot, or somebody who was about to get married. Maybe it was somebody's birthday. Very early on, Jim started saying that after you eat your chips, you should take the Grippo bag, fold it up, and carry it in your back pocket for good luck. Caught on. People did it. We still do. I got mine. Handed to me by Jim Scott. A move I think he might regret because he gave it to me on the golf course. And after that day, he never beat me again. My handicap went down like 5 strokes. Jim would never ever go anywhere without his Grippo bag. Because no matter where he went, everywhere, somebody was going to ask if he had that bag in his back pocket. Occasionally, there were women who would like pat his butt. Even, I'm told, on his honeymoon in Paris, a couple from Delhi who happened to be there saw Jim, recognized him, ran up near the Eiffel Tower, asked him if he had his Grippo bag. And as Jim would always do, he'd give a little look like, "You caught me." And then he'd reach his right hand into his left pocket and whip out the bag to everybody's delight. We'd like to thank Grippo's tonight. They are one of the sponsors for this celebration of Jim Scott's life. And now, here's a fun commercial you might remember from 1996. Jim representing Grippo's and the Perfect Picnic Partners.
Man, this is the life, huh, Chris?
You bet, Jim. The sun, the sand.
The Grippos, the JTM pork chopettes.
Right. There's nothing like the great taste of JTM pork chopettes.
And nothing's more fun than crunchy Grippo potato chips.
Together, they're the perfect picnic partners.
Get coupons for all the picnic partners on bags of Home City Ice.
How about some more Grippos and JTMs?
Man, that sounds great to me.
Oh, Chris, it looks like we're going to have to find another beach.
Yep.
In addition to Grippo, for many years, Jim was a spokesperson for the Kroger Company, more than 40 years. He was very proud to be associated with Kroger, and he absolutely loved making appearances in their stores. He got to meet and talk to shoppers. Maybe he'd buy flowers for a woman who'd no one to give them to her. I've been Krogering with Jim, in fact, right here on Delhi Pike, and can't tell you the number of times that somebody would come up. Maybe they'd introduce themselves, ask for his Grippo bag. More often than not, they'd ask him where something was in the store. And God love Jim Scott. He'd take them by the arm and he'd say, honey, we're going to go find out. And they'd walk up and down the aisles till they found what they were looking for. Even when Jim's ALS made standing and walking too tiring, he continued to make those store appearances. He'd drive up and down the aisles now in a motorized shopping cart, still sparking joy in everyone he met and talked to. Kroger was dear to Jim's heart, and we want to thank the Kroger Company as well tonight for sponsoring this celebration. You know, you just never know who you're going to bump into in a Kroger store.
Found it. Let's go.
I'm going as fast as I can.
You two are trying to cut?
We're in a hurry.
After we save with our Kroger Plus card inside the store, we're going outside to save.
We can save on tickets to the zoo.
We can save at the Dayton Air Show.
You can even save on select seats at Reds games. Riverbend, First Star Center, Coney Island.
How'd you know? Well, you might be smart.
But you got a face for radio.
Look who's talking. Look who's talking.
You know, that's a great commercial. It brings back wonderful memories because Jim talking about having a face for radio. Come on, Jim, are you kidding me? You had three guys there whose heads were a little bit less than perfect. You know, Jim Scott and I go back, back to 1974 when I first came to Cincinnati, replacing Al Michaels as a broadcaster with the Reds, and I didn't know who Jim Scott was. I didn't know who anybody was. And I'll never forget that as soon as my family and I got settled in a house out on Rambling Hills Drive in Anderson Township, one morning there was a commotion outside, and I looked out the window, and there were the Kings Island cartoon characters en masse that have come out to my house to welcome my two kids at that time, who were 10 and 9, Tom and Dawn, to Cincinnati. It was an incredible welcome to our great city. And Jim was not done yet, because then came opening day, April the 4th, 1974, and Jim sent a limousine to my house in Cincinnati to take me to Riverfront Stadium to broadcast my first Reds game. That's when the relationship began. And all through the years, everywhere I went, I would see Jim Scott. And the thing that most amazed me about the man was the fact that he never changed. He was simply one of the greatest guys that God ever put on this earth. And then I think about what incredible passion and love that he had for the Findlay Market Parade. We all know what a great thing that was for opening day, and how nothing can happen until the Findlay Market Parade takes place. Jim Scott began walking in that parade in 1968, and he continued through 2024 when he was the honorary Grand Marshal. He had such a love for that event. I think about the relationship that we had. I think about the friendships that we developed with Jim and his wife, Donna. And I was thrilled when Jim passed away to think back to the fact that my wife, Amanda, was formally introduced to that couple years ago, and we became very, very good friends. Jim Scott was just an incredible human being, a man who was the giant among giants in Cincinnati radio. We've reached a 7th inning stretch. And I think in Jim's memory, and to let him know that we're thinking about him and the great game of baseball, let's all sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." We'll do it in 1, 2, 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, and we'll root for the Reds team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Let's do it one more time in case you didn't hear us. 1, 2, 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, and we'll root for the Reds team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Play ball.
Dr. Neal?
Donna, I apologize. My tiara is in the shop tonight. But I did wear my Jim Scott shirt. Jim always loved this shirt. I don't know why, but this was his shirt that he always made a special point about telling me how much he loved it. So for those who don't know me, my name is Rob Neal. I am the director of the UC ALS clinic here in Cincinnati. I had the pleasure of walking along with Jim and Donna in the course of his ALS. Most people don't understand what ALS is, so I thought I would tell you a little bit about ALS first. ALS is a neurodegenerative disease that causes a slow wasting of muscle, and that muscle is in your arms, your legs, your chest, and also in your face and your throat and your mouth. It is a slow disease that is terminal, unfortunately. We do not have a cure yet. We're doing better, we have better treatments, but we still don't have a fix. I will tell you that I truly had the pleasure of walking with Jim and Donna, and it is the greatest pleasure to be able to walk and be let into someone else's life as a physician. And I will say Jim and Donna let me in the entire way. From the beginning of his disease, when we still weren't sure it was definitely ALS, through the very end of his life, Jim was a consummate gentleman. That's how I think of Jim. He was a gentleman through and through. I thought I would tell you a little bit about the journey for most people with ALS. As was mentioned earlier at the beginning, Jim had polio when he was a child, and that is a wasting disease of the limbs as well. Most people recover, and they do well through most of their life, but they can develop a condition later on called post-polio syndrome. And at the beginning, when we were working with Jim, we thought, maybe that's what we're dealing with. Maybe this is just post-polio. And we followed through. We call this period the gray zone. And the gray zone is that time when we don't know for sure what we're dealing with. He approached every visit with determination with me. Determination to show me how strong he was, how well he was doing, and that he had the verve to fight whatever it was that was coming. He would always work to show me his strength. In the middle of the disease, after we had made the diagnosis, Jim attacked it again with that same determination. He still wanted to golf, and he took other people with ALS on golfing trips. In order to do that, he worked with one of our occupational therapists to get a splint made so that he could still hold his golf club and still golf. And thank you, Colton, for that, which was amazing. The last phase of his life was probably the hardest, but also when I saw even more of that consummate gentleman. He made sure to make everyone laugh along every step of the journey, even though most of us felt like crying for a lot of the time. He used his gentleman's charm and that impish smile, and I love that word impish for him, because he made everyone smile, and he warmed everyone's heart whenever he could, every person he touched. And again, I keep going back to that word, gentleman. My favorite moment that I was privileged to have was with Jim at that parade. When Jim, when you were there driving that car, I can't see in the dark, but Andy let me have his place in the car, and I got to ride with Donna and Jim, and we got Jim through that last parade. And I had all my own worries and fears that Jim would not be able to get through that parade, and he did. That was the force of his character and his mind and his strength. and he used that every day. And he gave Cincinnati a beautiful, lasting, and warm goodbye. And I just remember him taking his hat off with his right hand and tipping it to people as he went by. He couldn't talk as well, but he could tip his hat to everyone he went by, the consummate gentleman. He turned that day into a magical day. They still joke with me that Donna said, "Rob, you didn't know what to do with yourself," and I was amused at watching you not know what to do. And Mr. Lucan always gives me a hard time. He said to me that, Rob, you really didn't know what to do with yourself. But I felt like a magical prince in that car, like I was riding with the President of the United States. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. Donna, I really wanted to thank you and to your friends and family who have put this all together, to Jim's sons. This is truly an amazing night for Jim. And the tribute of going to the UCGNI ALS Fund, which helps us provide those services to our patients, is an amazing gift to our community. I am proud to be a Cincinnatian. I am proud to be a Midwesterner. We take care of our people. We watch out for each other. We protect each other, and we are good to each other. And Jim was the best of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Neal. We're going to give you a chance now to help the other ALS patients. In the lobby, if you didn't see when you came in, there are raffle baskets, and we also have some gym memorabilia out there, but please buy some chances. Remember, the money raised tonight is going to go to help people with ALS. And I have one other ask of you before you leave your seats. As you get up and as you go to the lobby tonight, take a minute in true Jim Scott fashion to introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. Reach out your hand, inquire about them, make them feel valued in the same way that Jim sparked joy everywhere he went. We're going to break for about 30 minutes, and I'm going to come down off the stage now and meet you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for spending money, for supporting the cause tonight. If I was Jim, I would remember every one of your names. I am not. I apologize, but it's nice to meet all of you. One thing that most of you know about Jim is that he loved to golf. Anywhere, anytime, Sharon Woods or Scotland, Miami Whitewater or Maui. Jim even got to play Augusta, the golfer's dream. Two of us played several times. Every year, even after he retired, we tried to make that a priority. You know how Jim loved golf. It didn't matter if it was sweltering summer heat like today or if there had been a snow flurry or 2 in the morning. Jim was always up for a round. Didn't matter when or where. The man he loved to golf most with was his best friend, Jack. The two of them extremely tight for more than 50 years. Jack's cancer kicked in about the same time that Jim was diagnosed with ALS. By the spring of 2022, Jack couldn't golf with Jim anymore, and Jim found himself feeling lost for golfing companionship. His friend, whose name is Jim as well, Jim Schwartman, invited Jim Scott to play golf with a group of guys from Western Hills who call themselves the Sons of Pitches. Pitches with a P, by the way, as in pitching wedge. For short, the SOPs. There are about 25 of them. Every Wednesday morning, they meet at Newman Golf Course, divide up into foursomes and play golf. They are all elder high school graduates and bleed a Panther purple, except for Jim Schwartman, who went to Muller High School. And I guess that's okay. Jim started golfing with this group every Wednesday. And every Wednesday, Donna would say he came home as excited and happy as a third grader about the new friendships he made. At that time, nobody knew about Jim's diagnosis with ALS. In October of 2022, once the golf season ended, Jim suddenly and totally lost the use and control of his left arm and his hand. It happened within about 4 days due to the ALS. His greatest sadness about it was that he thought he would never golf again. Over the winter, however, Jim contacted a friend who was a former golf pro. Man found some videos showing Jim how one-armed golfers did it, the techniques they used. They worked with Jim for only an hour or so, but he came home a one-armed golfer, and again, as happy and as excited as a kid in 3rd grade. When Jim showed up to play golf with the SOPs in the spring of 2023, his left arm hung useless, and he had begun using a cane. Cane, by the way, that Jim named Abel. The SOPs knew something was wrong with Jim, but they didn't ask any questions. They'd help him tee up his ball, looked out for him. They embraced Jim with loving friendship and laughter. As Jim grew weaker and wobblier with one arm, he could still swing the golf club and hit the ball straighter than most people could who have 2 arms to play with. The SOPs declared that the last Wednesday of the golf season would be the one-armed Jim Scott Classic. So all these guys, everybody, had to play golf with one arm. And that's what they did. A couple of days later, at an SOP lunch, Elder Principal Kurt Ruffing showed up and had a framed proclamation that named Jim Scott an honorary Elder Panther. You'd have thought that Jim won the Nobel Prize. It was a few days after that his ALS went over the cliff. He couldn't golf again, couldn't walk, but the SOPs still visited and texted him often. They brought Jim a purple everything, including the purple blanket you may have saw up front. That kind of became Jim's Linus blanket. It was Jim's great desire to one more time ring the bell for the Salvation Army that Christmas. And when Jim rolled out of his medical transport in his wheelchair at the Dent Kroger, there were the SOPs waiting there to ring with him. At the Findlay Market Parade last year, the SOPs were there with a huge banner celebrating Jim. Elder High School's motto is Altiora. It's a Latin word that means the higher things. The Elder Sons of Pitches live that motto. Elder High School's my alma mater, and I can't thank the Panther community enough for the way that they embraced Jim and accepted him as one of their own. During my years as a Purple Panther, I performed with the Elder Glee Club, and today, amazingly, is still under the direction of Mr. David Allen, the West Side's music man. Dave Allen is another man with a more than 50-year career. Welcome into the stage tonight, and welcome the Elder High School Glee Club Ensemble to sing in honor of Jim and those Sons of Pitches.
about the Elder High School Glee Club? Huh? My name is Mo Egger. I do the afternoon show on ESPN 1530, working for iHeartMedia, also heard here and there on 700 WLW. I get the unenviable task of following in the footsteps of not only the Elder High School Glee Club, but also the words of Denny Jansen and Brian Combs, which, that's right. I don't know if this is being recorded, but if it is, the audio of Brian singing, we're going to need at the radio station on Monday. So, above and beyond that, I get a chance to talk a few minutes with you folks about the greatest radio personality in Cincinnati history. Yeah. There are some legendary radio personalities who are here tonight who are sitting there going, damn, Mo, hell. Anyway. And on top of that, I get a chance to talk about somebody who is very important to me. I first met Jim in 1998. I was 20 years old. Wow, look at that. I was not 20 years old. That's not when we first met. 1998 for me was 2.5 chins ago. So I meet Jim, it's 1998. I am a college student at the University of Dayton, and thank you, that's right, yeah, go Flyers. And I had gotten a part-time job at the radio station on the weekends, running the board, really not being of any value to anybody, but I guess I had done okay, because somebody came to me and said, well, Jim Scott needs a producer. And Jim had just come back from Wink 94.1. I remember that being a big deal. And so now he's back and he needs a producer. And somebody thought it's a good idea to take this established, and that's putting it mildly, radio legend and pair him with somebody who has no experience. Bright idea. So I said, all right, what does it involve? And they go, well, you know, Jim's show starts at 5 a.m. And I said, so I'm going to UD, which is an hour away for those of you who have never seen a map. I'm going to drive an hour in the middle of the night. I'm going to get there at 5 a.m. and then drive back to Dayton. Do I get paid more for this? And I was told, well, no. And I said, well, do I have to work the weekend still? And they go, yeah. So I said, no, thank you. And then I went home and I told my dad. And my dad says to me, let me get this straight. You have no experience. You have no money. You don't have a full-time job. And you get a chance to work with Jim Scott. And I remember he goes, that's the Jim Scott, right? And you said no. And fortunately for me, I listened to Dad. And in a lifetime of bad decisions, I made a good one and made the phone call that I needed to make and said, actually, if you haven't hired anybody else, I'll take the opportunity and I'll work with Jim. So I meet Jim for the first time. I go into a studio and I knew who Jim was. I grew up listening to Jim. Jim closed my school, right? You know what that was like? When Jim would announce your school. And then on the days where like Jim would not announce your school and you were kind of pissed off at him, right? Like, I grew up in Kent County, Kentucky, so he closed Boone County, Campbell County, and it's like, and sometimes he'd forget Kenton County, and it's like, maybe Jerry Thomas will close Kenton County schools, I don't know. So anyway, I go in, and those of you, most of you I'm sure have met Jim. You know what that first meeting is like, right? You know, hi, I'm Jim Scott, what's your name? Where are you from? Where'd you go to high school? What's your dad's name? Where'd he go to high school? What's your mom's? I mean, just on and on and on. And I was blown away because this guy had no reason to want to know anything about me. I would have been lucky if he just knew my name. But it instantly hit me that this was somebody who could relate to and connect with everybody. And to me, at least, that was the secret sauce that made him such a great broadcaster. He could connect with and relate to anybody. And so I come on as Jim's producer, and I have no problem telling you I had no idea what I was doing. I made tons of mistakes, but I knew a few things. I knew, number one, I wanted to work in radio. I knew, number two, that I desperately wanted to fit in at a radio station that I revered so much. And I knew, in part because of my dad prodding me, I knew I had an incredible opportunity in front of me because every day, every single morning, I had a front row seat for greatness. true greatness, a graduate level masterclass in how to prepare, how to perform, how to evolve, which was so important, how to bring your A game every day. I never saw Jim Scott mail it in. He often saw me mail it in. I never saw him mail it in. He brought the same energy and enthusiasm every day, and it was infectious. It was contagious. He made a really hard job look and sound so easy. I think Brian touched on this a little bit earlier, but like within a half hour, within 1/2 hour of his 4-hour show, he could interview a local politician about an important civic issue, and then he could do a segment on, something happening on Wall Street, and then he could interview an actress from a TV show. He could then pivot to a hit with a correspondent in the Middle East, and then finish up the half hour talking with the coach of a local sports team, and all the while staying on time, working in the elements, traffic and weather, working in live commercials, which there was no one greater at doing live commercials than Jim Scott. Jim once, our traffic helicopter crashed on I-275. Many of you know the name Dave Yiddy Armbruster. Fortunately, Yid ended up being okay, but the helicopter ran out of gas, which top-notch operation we had going on there at the time. Jim somehow weaved that into a La Rosa's commercial. And it was like, when you're having a bad day like Yid, you just call 347-1111, and I'm like, I love La Rosa's Pizza more than anybody. I'm like, Jim, I don't know if I crashed a helicopter that the first call I'm making is 347-1111. But he could do all of this, and all the while he's in total control. And it's chaotic, man. There's a lot going on. You're a traffic cop, but you've got to sound in control. And all the while sounding like he was absolutely having the time of his life, because he was. I truly don't think most people understand. I didn't, when I started, understand how much versatility that requires and how much preparation that requires. Jim was the most prepared and versatile radio host I've ever seen. So you get into radio, or at least you should, because those jobs on the air and off are supposed to be fun. And no one had more fun being on the air than Jim Scott. Jim loved being out and about, you know that. He loved speaking at banquets, hosting events. He loved walking around and shaking people's hands. He loved being Jim Scott, but he loved performing on the radio. I've never seen anybody who just got such a bigger kick out of performing and being in front of a microphone than Jim, and he made it fun for the rest of us, and that was so important, man. It was so important. He'd also make it educational, and sometimes, for me, I could learn just by watching, and you could learn a lot. You guys know this. You could learn a lot about how to treat people by watching Jim treat people, and sometimes it was a big deal. Sometimes it was a celebrity that'd be in the studio, and sometimes it'd be another kid that just got hired at the radio station, and he would be as equally nice to both of them. And then sometimes he'd pull me aside and kind of give me a lesson on things, like how to not show up to work late. Or sometimes he came to me once and said, what are you doing for lunch tomorrow? And I said, a morning show, lunchtime is kind of quitting time for you. And I said, nothing. He goes, well, I want you to join us for lunch tomorrow. It's going to be me and a salesperson, and we're going to go on a sales call because you have to know how to do that. And so the next day, Jim, myself, a salesperson, we go and meet with a prospective advertiser. And the easiest job in the world was the job of the salesperson, who had to sit there and drink a Coke while Jim did all the work. So, but he really taught me a lot about, the performative aspect of radio, but he taught me a lot about the business aspect and how to work with advertisers and the responsibility you have when you're representing an advertiser, and that advertiser has chosen to invest in you and your radio station. He also made he made those of us who worked with him feel like we were a big part of his success. Jim was nominated for a Marconi in 2002, Large Market Personality of the Year. And for those of you who don't know, the Marconis are kind of like the Academy Awards of radio. There's an annual ceremony. And that year's ceremony was in Seattle. And if you look at that picture right there, the guy on the left is a guy by the name of Rich Wahlberg. And if there's one thing that would make tonight better, it would be if Rich were here. Rich unfortunately passed a few years ago. He was an absolute genius. He was the executive producer of the radio station, and he had a heck of a lot more to do with helping out Jim than I did. And so Rich and I find out that Jim is nominated for the Marconi. And we made plans to get together the night of the ceremony and hang out, and we were gonna find out whether or not Jim won. And if he won, we were gonna celebrate and get drunk. And let's be honest, if he didn't win, we were still gonna get drunk. But about a week and a half before Jim is set to go to Seattle, our boss calls us into his office, Daryl Parks, who is here tonight. And Daryl tells us, you know, Jim kind of wants you guys to go to Seattle with him. And at that point in my life, I didn't really have the resources to cobble together a last-minute cross-country trip. So I said, that's really nice, but it's not going to happen. And then Daryl proceeds to tell us that, well, Jim's going to pay for you guys to go, and he's going to pay for your significant others to go as well. And so, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So off to Seattle we go, and I guarantee you that there were times when Rich and I behaved in a way that made Jim regret inviting us to Seattle with him. I think in particular, Donna might be able to remember this. The airplane ride to Seattle was quite eventful, but we go to Seattle, and the ceremony is in this big hotel ballroom, and the category that Jim was up for was one of the last of the night. There were like, I don't know, 12, 15, maybe 20 categories at the course of the evening. And as the night goes along, it starts to hit me like, this is a big deal. There's like a who's who of radio in here. This is a really big deal. And I'm thinking, man, if Jim ends up winning, that'll be a really, really big deal. And I'm sure you saw in the lobby out front here before the show, Jim's Marconi. He won. Yeah, large market personality of the year, 2002. There we are. And so when they announced Jim's name, we were sitting in the back of the ballroom. We were so fired up. We were so excited. And it was so cool. We got to watch him walk up on stage, and he gets handed the hardware. But what I remember more than anything about that night is when he got to the stage, you know, he thanked his family, and, you know, he thanked the radio station. And then he talked about me, and he talked about Rich. And then he made us, as you could tell, he made us join him on stage. And that is my picture. That is one of my prized possessions. That tie I'm wearing is not one of my prized possessions, but that photo is. He made that Marconi Award. He made us feel like that was as much ours as it was his, even though it was clearly his. And there was not one other winner who did that night. So we celebrate that night, and we go back to our hotel, and we ordered champagne that Jim paid for. And I ordered a few rounds of beers, knowing that Jim's card was behind the bar. And that was really fun. And the next day, we set off to fly back to Cincinnati. If you've seen the Marconi Award, it was about a year after 9/11. We had the hardest time getting that through airport security, which was a lot of fun. But what I remember more than anything, and this was so important, this made such a lasting impression as a young guy. You know, we're sitting at the airport gate the night before Jim has won this award. We're still basking in the glow. I just want to take a nap. Like, I mean, we're so excited. And right before we board, Jim looks at me and goes, "What's on the show tomorrow?" And if you think about it, man, that's an important lesson. You know, like, yesterday's show doesn't matter, last ratings book doesn't matter, last night's accolade doesn't matter. Got to be prepared for what's next. Got to be prepared for what we're doing tomorrow. So what we're going to do next is talk about what happened after Jim retired in 2015. As you might imagine, Jim often told folks he didn't miss getting up at 2:30 in the morning, but he missed having an audience to share with things that happened in his life. You know, he would often go to dinner, maybe go get a drink, and as you, I'm sure, can imagine, ask the server their name, ask about them, find out where they were going to school, and the next day on the air, he would just work that into the conversation. Oh, I went to Whiskey's in Lawrenceburg, and Amy, the server, took great care of us, and, you know, she's a student at Indiana University, and boy, next time, I mean, it was just, he loved doing that. So In retirement, he would sleep in until the late hour of 5:30. And as always, wake up happy, wake up filled with energy. And instead of on the air, he found his audience on Facebook. And I can tell you this as a friend of Jim's on Facebook, there was this ray of light in what is otherwise this cesspool of negativity on Facebook. Like, you know, I mean, I'd have my aunts and uncles complaining about politics, and then Jim Scott with a sunny thought, which was very, very welcome. But he would share shout outs and he would share stories, and sometimes he would post songs by his favorite singers. And as I'm sure those of you who know Jim well would remember, one of his favorite artists was Lyle Lovett. And so one morning, Jim posts this.
Morning. Little Lyle Lovett in the morning never hurt nobody. And it's fun to dance to.
Ain't it something that the way things go? Ain't it something? Yes. Ain't it something? Oh. Ain't it something? Ain't it something how the way things go? Ain't it something? Ain't it something? Ain't it something?
How you doing now? Dance by yourself in the morning, in the kitchen, you'll try it. Lyle Lovett.
Telephone is ringing, ain't it something when she says hello? Ain't it something when she hears?
I think I tried to hear it. Oh, it's better.
Ain't it something? Ain't it something?
Especially you. I love everybody, especially you. So if you feel lonesome, remember it's true. I love everybody, especially you.
I love everybody. Especially you. I love everybody. Especially you. I love everybody. Especially you. I love everybody. Especially you.
Silly.
How many of you remember the Facebook clip? That's the day I unfriended Jim on Facebook, actually. No. So Jim first lays eyes on Donna on Halloween 1990 at a fundraiser at the Playhouse in the Park. What was weird about it is Jim didn't wear a costume that night. No. Obviously dressed as a Grippo bag. He was that evening's MC. He was also the costume judge. So Jim awarded Donna first prize. She was dressed as Lady Godiva. Not exactly love at first sight, but it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And so for the next 5 years, Jim and Donna's paths would cross constantly, and Jim always had a really nice looking date on his arm. And Donna remembers, this is her quote, "He was the only man I ever knew who wore the tux the tux did not wear him. And so they would meet often for lunch or for dinner, and on morning runs before work, Donna would often stop by the Mount Adams radio studio for a quick hello, and once Jim agreed to teach Donna how to drive a stick shift, but he said, "You have to learn in the next 45 minutes because I have a date." So one evening at dinner, about 5 years into their friendship, Donna asked Jim, "Could we have a date? Could the next time we go out, could we call it a date?" And Jim said, "No." And Donna says, "Well, why not? I'm the first person you call every morning and the last person you call every night. Why can't we have a real date?" And Jim says, "Because if it doesn't work out, I don't want to lose you as a friend." And so the way Donna remembers it is stunned by the concept and tells Jim, "Look, I promise you, if a date doesn't work out, I'll teach you platonic." I thought I already had. And so they called their next dinner together a date, and that was it. They fell gently and happily and deeply in love. In late 1999, 9 years after that Halloween party, Jim took Donna to dinner at the Masonette, and completely and totally to her surprise, he romantically proposed marriage. They were married 6 months later by Jim's friend, Judge Nathaniel Jones, in his downtown chambers. And even though he was the distinguished head of a U.S. Court of Appeals, Judge Jones had never before married anyone. He found a template for the ceremony, and he told Donna to come prepared to recite her favorite poem to Jim. The way Donna remembers it, she says, "I always liked the poem Casey at the Bat, but that would be kind of weird, right? So I checked out every book of poems at the library and nothing felt right. So I chose instead to recite Jim the lyrics of a beautiful Ella Fitzgerald song. At the last second, though, I decided to just wing it and sing it to Jim. It became our song. We danced to it anywhere the pianist would play it. So ladies and gentlemen, here to sing Donna and Jim's song, I Could Write a Book, is Cincinnati's legendary own, the award-winning Nancy James.
If they ask me, I could write a book about the way you walk and whisper and look. I could write a preface on how we met, so the world would never forget. And the simple secret of the plot is just to tell them that I love you a lot. Then the whole world will discover as our book ends how we made two lovers of Jeff Pittman on guitar. Thank you, Jeff. And the simple secret of the plot is just to tell them that I love you a lot. And the world discovers as their book ends how they made two lovers of friends. Yes, the world discovered as their book ends. A simple thing, how they made two lovers of friends.
about Nancy James? Incomparable, right? So I worked with Jim for hand in hand as his producer for 5-6 years, somewhere in that year. And when I moved off of Jim's show, I pivoted to other roles at the radio station. And my goal, became I wanted to be a full-time on-air radio personality. And at a place like ours, that's really not that easy to do. They're not going to put a kid on the air, and they shouldn't put a kid on the air. So I kind of had to wait my turn, and when I finally got a few chances to be on the air, I'm more than comfortable in telling you that I was terrible. Daryl's out there nodding his head. And one of the things I really struggled with, I had this mental block. Anytime I'd go behind a microphone, I'd have this mental image of the real broadcasters, Jim Scott, Mike McConnell, Bill Cunningham, all gathering together and listening to me and laughing at the twerp kid who was, getting a chance to be on the air. And it's something that took me forever to get over. This one particular Saturday, I'm on the air. I think I was on from like 6p to 9p, maybe 10p, whatever it was. And it's one of those shows where I know as I'm on the air, I'm not getting it done. I'm not connecting with anybody. I'm not making sense. I'm woefully unprepared, and all I'm doing while I'm on the air is I'm looking at the clock. And that's not how you're supposed to do it. If you're looking at the clock, you're just trying to get to the next break, and if you're doing that, you're not creating content, you're filling time. And I'm filling time, and I'm filling time poorly. And so I get to one break, and I'm sitting there feeling sorry for myself, and I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do I get out of this funk? How do I make the rest of the show at least somewhat listenable? And my email is open, and there's a message from Jim Scott. And it says something to the effect of, "Hey, Mo, just want to know I'm listening to you. You made a great point about the Reds earlier, but look, you've got to pick up your energy, and you've got to start sounding more confident." And he was right. And I know that might sound small, but it's not. When somebody of that stature goes out of their way to tell someone of my stature, not only am I listening, but here's something you can do better, that means more than all the money in the world. That's not the kind of thing that happens often. So these days I do a show every day in the afternoon, and for a number of years that I miss this immensely. One of the real treats has been to occasionally look at my phone during a break, and there's a text from Jim Scott letting me know that he's listening. And sometimes very complimentary, like, "Hey, that was a great interview." And sometimes a suggestion, like, "Hey, I was thinking this would be a good guest idea." And sometimes scolding, like, "Hey, probably time to move on from this topic." This is the greatest radio personality in Cincinnati history taking an active interest in my show. Are you kidding me? And the cool thing is, like, that's who Jim was, and you guys all know that. It wasn't just that way with me. I'm lucky enough to get a chance to talk to you folks about this, but he did that with tons of us, on air and off. And it continued until the very end. It's funny, I was watching the clip of Jim play golf with one arm, and Jim called me not too long after that photo was taken 2 summers ago, and told me that he was diagnosed with ALS. And I was sitting on my living room couch. It was mid-afternoon, early evening, summertime, and I was heartbroken. And I'm sitting there, and I don't know what to say. And my wife is looking at me, and she could tell something's not right. And I heard ALS, and I kind of zoned out, and I'm just at a loss. And he starts talking about how, I'm going to teach myself how to play golf with one arm. And then there's a pause, and before I could say anything, and he goes, "And I'll still beat your ass." So there was a Saturday late in 2023, and Jim was in the hospital, and I think there was some sort of allergic reaction to something that he was taking, and so the ALS symptoms were accelerating, and I I think Donna had told me this, and so I texted Jim, and I would go and see him periodically. And I texted him and I just said, hey, I'm thinking about you. And I asked, is there anything that I could do? And, you asked that question, well, what can I do? I can't make the ALS go away. There's nothing I can do. But you ask it anyway. And so I didn't hear back, and that was okay. The next morning I was on the air before a Bengals game from the Holy Grail downtown with my colleague Tony Pike, the former UC quarterback. And at one point during our show, I look at my phone during a break, and there's a message from Jim. And he was answering my question from the day before, which was, is there anything that I can do? And all the text back to me said was, quote, keep doing great shows like the one you're doing with Tony right now. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, if Jim were here right now, he would be sending me a text telling me it's time to move on. So let's talk about Jim's love of music. In 2003, when Jim was 60 years old, he decided to start running. I remember this. He liked it, and he was really good at it, and then he decided to apply to run that year's New York City Marathon, and his application was accepted. He had gone to a lot of marathons to watch Donna run. This particular year, though, they would train and run the marathon together. And so one night that spring, Jim and Donna hear an extraordinary singing voice on the Prairie Home Companion radio program. The singer's name was Kristen Chenoweth. And she said she'll be opening a new Broadway musical on October 30th. So Donna says, hey Jim, we'll be in New York for the marathon, so let's get some tickets so we could hear Kristen sing. And so they did. They go to the show. And so, believe it or not, Jim and Donna were part of the opening night audience for Wicked. And think about that, 22 years ago, who knew what Wicked would become, right? Perhaps the show's most beautiful song is called For Good. As Sarah Winstead sings in this perfect song, let's think about knowing our friend Jim Scott and the difference he made in so many, many lives.
People come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through. Changed for the better, but because I knew you, I have been changed for good. It well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is made from what I learned from you. You will be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being I knew you, because I knew you, because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Maria Bruce, and I had the absolute privilege of calling Jim Scott a close friend. Being part of this evening, standing here in this room, surrounded by so many people who loved and admired Jim, is incredibly meaningful to me. Like all of you, I was touched by his warmth, his humor, his generosity, and his unwavering kindness. And like so many others, I carry a part of Jim with me every single day. Before we close this unforgettable night, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to the people who made this event possible. The incredible board behind the scenes who poured their time, talent, and hearts into making tonight a reality. To Mary Mazook, Donna Bruce, Mark McCafferty, Kevin McLaughlin, Greg Dastelung, Jim Bodel, Christopher Lawrence, and of course, Donna Hartman, Jim's amazing wife, thank you. Without your dedication, vision, and trust, none of this would have happened. This event was born out of love, and you all brought it to life in a way that truly honors Jim's spirit. A heartfelt thank you as well to our MCs, Denny Jansen, Brian Combs, and Mo Egger, for lending your voices, your energy, and your talent to guide us through this evening. You brought so much warmth. You brought so much warmth and familiarity to the stage, and I know Jim would have loved every minute of it. To the band, Jeff Pittman on guitar, Jan Deal on bass, George Bruce on drums, the singers, the lighting and sound teams, and all of our volunteers, thank you. You gave your time and talents to create an atmosphere full of joy, remembrance, and celebration. Your efforts did not go unnoticed. And lastly, to our incredible sponsors, Kroger and Grippos, thank you for standing behind this cause and supporting this event in such a meaningful way. Your generosity helped bring this vision to life. This evening has been about celebration of life, of legacy, and of love, all things that Jim embodied so effortlessly. Jim Scott meant a lot of things to a lot of people. To Cincinnati, he was a voice people woke up to, a comforting presence in our homes, cars, and hearts, a true radio legend. But to me, Jim was something different, something more personal. I met Jim at Mount St. Joseph University, right here where we are gathered tonight. It was in a psychology elective class, and honestly, I had no idea who he was. I just thought he was the sweetest guy in the room. On the very first day, he walked around the classroom and shook everyone's hand. Every single person. That's just the kind of guy he was, someone who always made everyone feel seen. After acing his first quiz, he stood up and yelled out, "Drinks on me at the beer market." Quickly, our professor, Mary Mazook, said, "Only if you're 21. As we were walking out of class, Jim turned to me and asked, "You coming?" I said yes. Then he replied, "You're 21, right?" That night, we sat and talked for hours, just two classmates getting to know each other. I still had no idea he was a local celebrity. It wasn't until one of our classmates leaned over and said, "You do know who that is, right?" Later that evening, I went home and asked my parents, "Hey, have you heard of someone named Jim Scott?" Their eyes got wide and they said yes. And when it finally clicked that the kind, funny, older gentleman I had been talking about, the one I had just had drinks with, was Jim Scott, their jaws practically hit the floor. That was the beginning of a friendship I will cherish forever. From that moment on, we went out every week after class. We laughed, we shared stories. We got to know each other not as student and radio icon, but as two people who truly enjoyed each other's company. Jim never made anything about him. He didn't want to talk about his career or his accomplishments, even though there were many. He wanted to know you, your story, your dreams, your heart. That's what made him so special. They say some people come into your life and change it for the better, and Jim was absolutely one of those people for me. He changed my life. He made me better, a better listener, a better friend, and a better person. I looked forward to his phone calls, and I still listen to his voicemails when I'm having a rough day. I'll never forget walking with him in the Reds opening day parade every year, grabbing lunch or dinner, and working on projects together. He was always there, always supportive, always Jim. When I first thought of this event, Jim was still with us. I wanted him to be here, to see this love, to feel it. But as we all know, ALS moved fast, and when Donna suggested that we transform this into a celebration of life, I knew it was exactly what we needed to do. Tonight we honored a legend, not just because of the decades he spent behind the mic, but because of the life he lived off air. A life of kindness, of curiosity, of humor, of friendship. We also raised money to help families of individuals struggling with ALS, a cause that's now incredibly close to our hearts. It's our way of continuing Jim's legacy, of helping others facing this disease, and of making sure that Jim's spirit, generous, joyful, and full of life, carries on. Jim, if you're listening, and I know you are, I hope we made you proud. I hope you felt the laughter, the love, and the celebration in this room tonight. You are missed beyond measure. You are loved beyond words. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, for supporting this cause, for showing up, not just for Jim, but for every single person still fighting. Let's carry this love forward. Let's honor Jim by living like he did, with grace, with kindness, and with joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. That was terrific. And you and your team did a wonderful, wonderful job. You are to be congratulated. That is just sensational. Brian, Mo, and I have some final remarks, and then guess what? We're going to give some stuff away. Huh? Got to stick around for that. I'm so proud to have been invited to join in this celebration. To share this stage with so many talented performers, and also to share this auditorium with so many warm-hearted people who also knew and wanted to embrace Jim and his life and his legacy. The elation we share today for a life well lived, of course, is in marked contrast to the emotion we shared 1 year ago today, when the shattering news of his passing descended on our community. Deeply mournful of his death, but at the same time, mindful of the dreadful affliction he and his family had dealt with for so long, we had to be collectively relieved that his burden had finally been lifted. When I first met Jim on that March afternoon in 1968, 57 years ago, I saw a man with a preternatural gift for embracing people, for embracing their situations, their celebrations, and yes, even their afflictions. Determined to make things better. Boy, did he ever succeed in that. He expressed to me that day that he thought he could be successful here in Greater Cincinnati, that the tone and tenor of the populace would make for a good fit for Jim Scott. Boy, could he read a room, or a city and a region. The real mystery is not how he succeeded, but how in the heck did his chauffeur from that fateful day, namely me, make a career for himself and achieve a standing worthy of being before you tonight? Well, Jim encouraged me. He set an example. And he let you know if you were not living up to your potential. Be it on the softball field, the basketball court, or in the studio. Never mean-spirited, mind you. Just a glance or a rolled eye or a double take that lets you know that he knew you could do better. And so I did. I'm sure there are others who also prospered from his goading, Mo. And finally, I've heard it said in recent years that parents are unfortunately reluctant to listen to the radio while taking their kids to school or the pool or anywhere anymore, fearful of some of the tripe that is disseminated over the airwaves anymore, passing as entertainment or information, call it what you will. No one ever had to worry about tender ears being assaulted by anything Jim Scott ever said on the air or in person. He was a gentleman, and he was a throwback in that regard to a time when broadcasters were revered as not just disembodied voices coming out of a speaker, but as spokespersons for their communities. And ours could not have had a more articulate voice. It was a privilege to know him, to work with him, to drive him around, and to be invited to honor him today. Thanks to everyone who made this celebration possible. But wait, kind of like ShamWow, there's more. Nancy James, would you please come back out, Nancy? Sean Kelly, Lady Joy, and Sarah Winstead to join us in one last chorus of Here Comes the Sun in honor of our friend Jim Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, please come back out. Out and helping propagate more research for ALS. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much, and God bless Jim Scott. Always in our memory. Good night, everyone.